Welcome to Firm. Is it pro-choice or cut funding? What's it going to be, folks? The battle between pro-choice birthright movement and the biological birthing programs in our country and our state here in Maine keep crossing paths that are eventually going to end up in the United States Supreme Court again if the violent rhetoric and intentional violence keep building to another boiling point. This is Mark Merrill. I'm referring to now the closings of the Damariscotta Birthing Center and two major hospitals in central and eastern Maine, but none of these closings, including this one, should have ever taken place because of the Mills administration forcing misappropriation of federal and state Maine care funds over the past 8+ years, 2019 to 2025. That math doesn't add up, but actually, trust me, it does. What to do? Well, let's discuss with our presentation here on Firm with facts that we've obtained and let you, Maine citizens, make a reasonable and actual conclusion about the law-abiding future of our state's existence without ignorance of the law. Shall we? So, ladies and gentlemen, continued discussion on the Maine Health under Janet Mills Board of Regents deciding to close the Damariscotta Birthing Center. Well, here now is a little bit of an interview on the topic with Laurel Libby, a registered nurse herself from WVOM Radio on August 17th. A little bit enlightening, shall we say.
What do you make of Maine Health making what some say is a smart fiscal decision based on the number of patients going through that Damariscotta birthing clinic there in Lincoln County versus kind of the emotional argument of an expecting mom's got to drive a long, long way in a too long a period of time if they're in labor?
You know, I think that this is, of course, as folks know, more than a fiscal decision here, but it is a very practical one. And since this was announced, I think we've seen my colleagues on both sides of the aisle calling for a pause and calling for the unit to stay open. Well, I have not, and part of that, Rick, is because I am an RN, and part of my career I spent down in Portland at Maine Medical Center in the ICU there, spent some time at St. Mary's in Lewiston, and I can tell you, you can't invent staff out of thin air. You cannot invent a nurse or a doctor where there isn't one. And when I read the letter from the Maine Health Board talking about why they're closing, talking about only having 130 births a year, having a full-time OB position open for 5 years while they tried to get staff, having to divert to other hospitals because they didn't have enough staff multiple times in 6 months. All of this leads to a picture of, that unit. I don't know if, driving to a hospital an hour away is terrible. And it's awful that there's not going to be a unit closer by for the women in this area. But keeping a unit open that doesn't have the staff that's safe to deliver babies. I wouldn't want to go to a hospital that doesn't have the proper staffing to be able to maintain a unit. That in itself is dangerous.
I want to ask about solutions in your opinion in a moment, but first, I wonder about maintaining the necessary infrastructure to support the growth goals of our state. We often talk about we want good roads and bridges, we want opportunities for people to come and live and work and raise a family in Maine. If we don't have a birthing clinic in the middle of Lincoln County in Damariscotta, aren't we risking turning off the potential growth of our population as we so desperately need?
We certainly are, but what comes first, the chicken or the egg? In this case, the economic situation that is driving this is more than I think folks are talking about here. We have one piece of that, 130 live births a year. We have the oldest population in the country, Rick. That means we have a lot of senior citizens, fewer young folks coming here, making this their home, starting businesses, having families. And so the 130 live births a year in the Damariscotta area is a symptom of the bigger problem. The problem isn't that we have birthing units closing. The problem is that we have birthing units closing because of the economy here in Maine that is driving people away from our state, that is ensuring young people don't come here in the first place.
Gee, that couldn't be said any clearer or better. Thank you, Ms. Libby, former state representative, and of course, moving on with her own organization, Speak Up, and also Lead Maine, L-E-A-D. Now, we do have some other input here, folks, as far as the closing of hospitals and the topic of our program in general, pro-choice or cut funding. A gentleman from the Skowhegan area, a doctor, who will remain nameless, we put this question to him. 3 months after Northern Light Clinic, right here, as you see beside me here, was still offering clients health care services, the primary facility, Northern Light Inland Hospital of Waterville, closed June 30th due to lack of revenue from the Mills administration fraud actions of Maine Care funding. Questions, Maine citizens? He replied, among 2 or 3 others. But we added to it, folks. How convenient how a hospital got closed at the end of June of 2025, just in time for Bobby Charles scheduled to visit and talk with several healthcare workers in the state about resolutions and active plans to restore and reinforce Maine Care. Come on, you can't tell me the deflectocrats aren't listening. But our doctor from Skowhegan replied this way in an email. My understanding is this. I could be wrong, he says, but Maine Care was expanded with temporary money under COVID, Biden administration, so Democrats could put more legal residents on Maine Care. But in hindsight, we see pretty much the money went to illegal aliens and to Somali Medicaid frauds with the idea that money would get kicked back to funding the Democrat agenda. He continues. Paul LePage turned the money, federal money down because I think he knew this was a D.C. Democrat slush fund. How about that? And a means to get more and more people on Maine Care, many who make a fair amount of income working for a living, not by stealth or misappropriations, as we said in the introduction statement of our program. But hey, the more people you can get dependent on government health care, the more votes you'll likely garner from those new people on the system. This is similar, he says, to many government programs that put all the sugar, free money, up front with the bill to show up later. Obamacare. When they rug pull the money, or pull the rug out, as it were, because it was temporary. Northern Light is a crappy outfit. Let's read that again. Northern Light, he wrote, is a crappy outfit. From what I can tell, says the good doctor. They were good, but it seems since they hooked up with Optum to cut spending, he says, I don't hear anything good about them. As Bill Green would say, no altitude, Lou. That's the view from here. We told the good doctor a good recap, sir. Pretty much the same view from here in the Waterville, Winslow, Oakland area. Damn it. As we continue on the program, folks, Mark Merrill here. As always, your host for Firm's topic on pro-choice, question mark, or cut funding, question mark. I want you to take a look at who the culprits are here, folks, as Libby pretty much gave them, didn't she? Not including Mr. Charles, of course. He's just running for governor on the Republican side to change things. Janet Mills right there in the middle, and Hannah Pingree seems to me she was her go-to gal. Well, that kind of sets everything up as to why she's running for governor and got the nomination. Oh no, 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 that was intentional. Think about it, folks. This is all a setup. Keep the nastiness, the communism, and the socialism going, and bleed out elderly people who need it the most, and young families, and prevent them from coming here in the first place. You heard it just now from Laurel Libby. A couple of more things here, folks. Well, actually, one more picture we'd like to present to you, and I think you'll get an eyeful on this one. This little girl, someone we had on our program a while back, actually a few months ago, if not a year or two ago. She is not an oppressor, if you can see that. Let's make sure that you can. There we are. She says, I am not an oppressor. Why should she be? It's not her fault that things like this are going on in our state and other states. Look at the state of Minnesota, for goodness sakes. Boston, Massachusetts. Can't imagine what's going on in Bernie's state, Sanders, Vermont. Yikes. New York. We should do a follow-up, and we probably will, folks, on Mamdani. See how things are going down there. Not too well, we understand, if you've been keeping up with the news lately. In the meantime, ladies and gentlemen, we want to thank you very much for checking in with us here on our topic in regard to healthcare and birth control, and whether or not to have a child anymore in our state, or elsewhere for that matter. Pro-choice or cut funding? Yikes. Some choice. As always, folks, check in with us here at Firm, fairnessinreportingmedia@gmail.com, fairnessinreportingmedia@gmail.com. We're also on YouTube, X, and on Substack.com at Mark Firm News 1. Substack.com at Mark Firm News 1. Everybody stay safe. Peace to all.